today we want to talk about an interesting article that made an appearance in ET, and that is with respect to intermediaries in mutual funds. This is something that all of us have had to tackle with. Sometimes mutual funds do not get directly credited into your account every time you make a purchase or an SIP, and hence SEBI has decided to plug this loophole in MF transactions. Now, if you guys have been tracking the news, I'm sure you may have recognized that this effort of the regulator is amongst the fallout of the Carvey affair. That's the reason why, essentially what SEBI has done is come out with this discussion paper that's called Usage of Pool Accounts in Mutual Fund Transactions. Now, the topic may sound very dreary, but it's extremely important for mutual fund unit holders as well. So let's bring on board Mrin Agarwal, the founder, director of FinSafe, to talk about this paper. Hi, Mrin. Thanks so much for joining us on The Money Show. Like I said, it's a rather drab and technical sounding title, Usage of Pool Accounts in Mutual Fund Transactions. This is the draft paper that SEBI has released. But tell us, why is it so important, this whole usage of pool accounts for mutual funds? How does it work, and what does this draft paper say?
Good evening, everybody. Well, I think it's a very important thing that paper that SEBI has come out with. First and foremost, see, there are two ways in which mutual fund transactions happen. If you are using a stockbroker, for example, then the stockbroker collects all the transactions for the day, collects all the money in an escrow account, and then pools this money in the escrow account and then passes it on to the clearing corporation, which then passes it on to the mutual fund. So what happens in this case, and what SEBI is really worried about, is that in this case, when you're pooling all the transactions and giving the funds or remitting the funds, then the visibility or traceability in terms of which investor invested how much is not there. So what SEBI is suggesting is that there needs to be a direct link between the customer and the mutual fund, and basically customer account funds need to be directly debited or credited to their account without this additional step being there in between.
Okay. Now, interestingly, there's also, how do you sort of correlate this to the Carvey case? Because SEBI as well wants to avoid any sort of Carvey situation come down for mutual fund investors. So is it a common practice as well for these pool accounts to be used in mutual funds? And why? I mean, is there any sort of benefit or advantage?
Well, I mean, if you look at the data, 50%, like if you look at the data of last year's transactions, 50% of transactions actually came in from pooled account and 50% came in from the non-pooled account. Now, I mean, why does this happen? I think this has just been the practice in terms of how stockbrokers have been working. But why does SEBI not want it? Because if you look at the Carvey case, essentially what happened was that whatever were the securities that were there in the pooled account were what were used to sell off, and then that money was basically invested elsewhere. So essentially they want to plug in this loophole that exists where somebody might be able to use the funds for other activities, which is not correct.
There's also a mention made to demat account usage, and even for that matter, some of these new fintech companies that have app-based mutual fund investing. How do they play a role in this entire thing?
Essentially, investors who are transacting through stockbrokers would be investing directly through their demat accounts. Now, even the fintech companies follow the same model, wherein the investors who invest, they pool in the money in an account and then remit it further. So essentially they're following a similar process as what is being followed in case of people who are investing through the demat account.
So then how do these new app-based fintech companies essentially hinder this entire mutual fund deposit process. I mean, does this, if let's say I go onto an app, and there are plenty of apps available out there, right, to, start an SIP, do an STP, do an SWP, whatever transaction. If I can even literally transfer from my savings account to a liquid fund, using all these apps. So, would you call this as an indirect route, of, dealing in mutual funds? And does it mean that we are using pooled accounts when you are using these app-based, app-based processes?
Yes, it is a pooled account when you're using the apps. But when you're using certain platforms, like there are certain platforms from the stock exchanges, those are not pooled accounts.
And I'm selecting an app. Should I be then wary about this? Because I don't want something that's happened, with the Carvey investors to happen with me.
I think so. I mean, I think it's better if you can, not if you can deal through a non-pooled way. So, I mean, one of the easiest ways is, of course, just directly investing on the mutual fund company website, or as I mentioned, you could use the exchange platforms that exist. But yes, it is something to be really wary about, given what we saw in the recent Carvey incident.
Well, yeah, I mean, convenience and reluctance to change, maybe some arguments against this, but over the last few years, I think through UPI, through net banking, I suppose we've got one of the most convenient payment systems in the world. So, and also, when you have a pooled account, there's always, when you're handling other people's money, essentially, there's always temptation to misuse it. That's what even the Carvey affair as well threw up, right? Even though it's a long recognized institution, nationally known names, so your fintech app-based names are still new kids on the block. So you must be a bit wary. And the best way to go and buy is essentially log on to the AMC. If you know that you want to buy a particular fund, let's say, for example, the Kotak Blue Chip Fund, just go on to the Kotak AMC website and you can buy in. And since it's going to be a direct fund, you won't even have to pay anything extra. Direct fund will always give you better returns than, something that you've purchased by an intermediary. So that is always a nice and convenient way, to purchase your mutual funds. On that note, let me remind all our viewers as well that our phone lines are open. You can call in on 24990300, or you can also email us on themoneyshow@etnow.tv. I just have one more question, Mrin, before I'll just give some time for those phone calls to accumulate. But Mrin, I have one more question. You mentioned that the safest way to do so, to buy a mutual fund, and I suppose it would be logistically, quite a nightmare to manage so many mutual funds if we do this. But like I mentioned, I like maybe a Kotak large cap fund, and then I like an HDFC mid cap fund, and maybe a Franklin Templeton small cap fund. So firstly, am I to go into each of these AMC websites and make my purchases, or, book my SIP? And, at the end of the day, when I want to know what SIPs do I have, or how many mutual fund units am I holding of each of these funds, how do I get that?
Well, you could always use the MyCams app as well. I mean, of course, there is a small limitation there in terms of that they don't offer all the funds, but you do have the option, as I mentioned, to use the exchange-based funds. You could use MyCams app as well. So I think, these are some of the alternative ways that you can actually transact. And as far as getting a view, I know going to each website is going to be quite cumbersome. Essentially, but also once you've done the investment, if you just want to view your investments and you want to see how they are performing, or you want to get capital gain reports and stuff like that, again, you can get that on MyCam. So I would say that that's a good alternative as well that's available.
Absolutely free of cost, Mrin?
Yes, absolutely free of cost. And another thing that I forgot to mention on as far as investing through the pooled accounts, or especially through stockbrokers, is the fact that if you are actually investing through them, then the asset management company does not take responsibility or the asset management company does not have the liability on credit of units or on payments, right? So that's another thing. That's another reason why this paper has come out, and that's another loophole, or that's another issue that's being trying to be addressed through this particular paper.
Okay, point taken. All right. Well, folks, you need to be a bit careful when you use pooled accounts. Like we saw the Carvey debacle as well, you do not want that to happen to your mutual funds. It could be quite problematic to see your lifetime's savings and investments actually being misused by somebody else. It could be a bit of an effort, but let's hope that the investing community, SEBI, will come out with a way to sort of simplify buying a mutual fund directly from the AMC and then having a consolidated statement. You could use the CAMS website, but it may have some limitations.